Building to the right or to the north was 1924. The Wrigley Corporation, Wrigley Gum, Wrigley Candy, and of course Wrigley Field. It's all the same there. This is a Spanish revivalist style of architecture. In the early 1900s, in the early 1920s, the United States had not yet come up with its own style of architecture, so we had to copy from Europe. That clock tower is actually a copy from a cathedral in Seville, Spain. 250,000 terracotta white tiles down the sides of that building, a design by a gentleman named Mr. Charles Bierman. Think of Wrigley Field. What's the most important guy at a ball game? The beer man. That's how you remember. Alrighty, folks, look up, look high, get that camera up. The second tallest building in the city of Chicago, Trump International Hotel and Tower. It joined the riverfront around 2009. Tops out at 1,389 feet high. It's a creation of Mr. Adrian Smith. Mr. Smith is billed as the world's tallest architect, a Chicago guy, 5 foot 8 inches tall. This is a contextualism style of architecture. Contextualism means it's designed to blend in and complement its surroundings. Trump Tower does that by the first level of, look at the different roof levels. The first level of roof matches that of the Wrigley building next door. Let your eyes continue on up to the second rooftop, then you come across and it matches the height of the Mathers Tower. That's that tall skinny piece right there sticking up. And then if we go up to the third level, it matches that of the Black Box building coming into our view now. The other attempt that was made here is with the gray as an attempt to pull the white of the Wrigley to the black of the AMA building, the blue to reflect the water. A contextualism style of architecture, if you moved it from its location, it would not fit anywhere else because it was designed for that area. Since doing the Trump Tower at 1,389 feet, the Burj Khalifa in Dubai was a project of Mr. Smith's, topping out at 2,700 feet, and he's working on a tower in Japan that will be over 3,200 feet, about 1 kilometer high. There you go. Back to the business at hand. Have your cameras up, have them ready. Off to your right, the two in the opening, the world famous towers of Marina City. Probably the most photographed towers in the city of Chicago. This is a project of Mr. Bertrand Goldberg. He's a Chicago guy, studied over in Europe in his youth. While in Europe, he discovered that people actually lived downtown Chicago, and downtown in the cities, and that was in the early 60s. That was not really happening here in Chicago yet. So Mr. Goldberg came back and came up with this creation. Mr. Goldberg said there are no straight lines and no 45-degree angles in nature, so he did not put them into his designs. Marina City is a residential building, so to make it so people could actually live in it, they needed all the amenities, such as dry cleaners, stores, movie theaters, restaurants, just to name a few. While you're at it, why not just go ahead and put a boat harbor at the bottom? You could even include a restaurant above. You gotta park your car somewhere, so why not have circular valet parking? And why not just go ahead and live in a pie-shaped apartment in the sky? This building has the absolute best balcony. Some of the units have 2 balconies each, so awesome views in there. So it's still a very active condominium building today. Off to our left over here, we're going along the part of the city known as the Loop. The Loop is the downtown central business district for the city. It gets the name the Loop because the elevated train comes in, circles the perimeter of the downtown, and takes the people back out. Well, I have your attention over here to your left. I don't want you to miss out on this white granite-based building. Look at the base of the building and then let your eyes follow those columns up to the top, to the Parthenon-style roof up there. This is a neoclassical design of architecture. That is, it's a copy of an old design of architecture, a Roman architecture, but it's built with modern-day materials, granite, glass, metal. Mr. Ricardo Bofill, our only international architect on the tour today from 1993. Over to your right is RPM. Just a fun place to hang out, have a great dinner, hang out with some really cool people. As we pass under the Clark Street Bridge, this is one of the 37 trunnion bascule bridges in the city of Chicago. Chicago has 37, which is second only to Amsterdam, who has 61. Off to your right is the Reed Murdoch building, a grocery warehouse when it was originally completed in the 1900s. Today serves as an office building, but and of course restaurant in there. But look at that clock tower at the top. A feature of this clock tower is that it appears to sit in the center of the building, but it does not. If you count the window bays on the right, you'll find there's 6 of them. But if you go to the left and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's only 5. That's because in 1930 they had to widen LaSalle Street. So to do that, they had to lop off the end of the building. They reconstructed it so you can hardly tell the clock tower is off center. Now look at this tall green glass structure off to your right. That's 300 North LaSalle, 2009. This is one of our most green energy efficient buildings in the city. But what I really like to point out about it is if you've seen the movie Transformer Dark of the Moon, if not, you'll want to see it when you get back home. This is the building that just falls down. Okay, it just falls over as it's standing. The main characters go sliding down the outside of the building. She did it with her hair, makeup, and heels, and never messed anything up. One of the eco-friendly features of this building is that the cooling system, generally the buildings are cooled by cold water that's chilled at the top in tanks of water at the top. Instead, this building takes cold water from the river, pumps it into the cooling system, and then returns it back to the river. There's only one problem with that, is every once in a while a fish comes flying through the ventilation system, but other than that, it's all good. We're passing under the Well Street Bridge. This is actually a replica of the bridge from the early 1900s. 2013, they built this new bridge off-site in sections, floated it and mounted it in a series of a couple weekends. Over here on our right, let's look at the Merchandise Mart, the one and the only, the world's largest office building when it was completed at the end of 1929. This is Art Deco. This is Americana. Okay, this is our first of our style of architecture. Indiana limestone on the sides of the building, recessed windows that create columns that take your eyes to the top, setbacks on the roof, and generally you'll see a repeat pattern. It's called a machine stamp up above as well. When you see this style of architecture, that's 1925 to 1930. All right, and I'll tell you later why 1930 was so important, but you'll always know that was the year it was built. Marshall Fields built it. Marshall Fields was the major retailers, one of the major retailers in the city of Chicago back in its day. Those posts with the heads on them are actually the bust of other famous retailers, Sears Roebuck, Montgomery Ward's, Eileen's, just to name a few. Rumor has it Jeff Bezos' ex-wife was about to put his head on one of those posts not so long ago. We just sailed into Wolf Point. Wolf Point is where the city began, in the first fur trading, hotels, etc. Today it's a collection of all glass buildings. Anyway, on your left over here, you see this green building with the curve. This is contextualism at its best, the Nuveen Center. Remember I said contextualism complements its surroundings. Well, this building does it because you see the bend of the building matches the bend of the river. This is where the river turns to go south. If you've seen the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off, this is the building where his dad worked, all right? Now, if you look straight ahead, you see the River Point building. The River Point building here, you notice that arch structure. That arch is very important because it looks decorative, but it's really part of the structure. That is how they got around and had to straddle the railroad that's underneath. There's actually an active railway still working underneath of there. Now, because of that arch and the arch design at the top, some people say that looks like a McDonald's apple pie box or a Hot Pocket. Man, wouldn't you be upset if you were an architect, somebody compared you to a McDonald's box? Anyway, that concrete wall you see there is what's hiding the railroad, and what looks like just decorative cutouts are not. Those are actually fans ventilating the exhaust from the train underneath. Now, that short little building off to the side, that's Gibson's Italian. Oh, good stuff, folks. Great Italian steakhouse. The only thing that makes it better is if somebody else picks up the tab, because it is quite pricey. Anyway, let's look at the Fulton House that's standing there before us, that reddish one in color. Now, when this was built in 1898, it's the oldest building on our tour today. It was not built as a residential building that it is today. It was actually a cold storage house. There was lots of stockyards around here, so when they'd slaughter the meat, they had to store it somewhere. They would bring down big chunks of ice from up north, float them down on barges, and put it into that building, which kept it cool. In 1971, when they shut that building down, it took 3 months for that building to thaw out. And that's because the walls were 4 feet thick, full of horsehair and cork. Okay? Mr. Harry Weiss, he's the one that gets credit for converting that into condominiums in 1981. I mentioned the trunnion bascule bridges. What that means, those bridges lift up from the middle to the outside. There's a big counterweight hidden in the bridge houses on each of the banks of the river on the opposite ends that are counterbalanced to move that weight of that metal structure. It takes about 110 horsepower motor to move those bridges. That's about the size of a Toyota Corolla motor. Okay, this is the Carroll Street Bridge from 1908, and it's still an active bridge, believe it or not. Union Pacific once a year drops the bridge down, drives a truck across, puts it back up, just so they can keep title to the bridge. On our left over here, though, now look at this funky little design. These are the river cottages. This was 1988. This is Mr. Harry Weiss once again. He's the guy that did the building next door, converted it. Mr. Weiss was a guy who he was a fan of sailing and nautical. So he put his personality in the building. Notice the triangles and the circles. The other thing that he did is when he built this structure, he built it with the front facing the river. That was a game changer, because up until then, all the buildings' backs face the river. Over here on our right is the East Bank Club. If you're into working out, this is the one and only gym in the whole country. It's nothing like it. But anyway, when it was built in 1980, it was built with its back to the river. It did not have a river walk. It did not have all the windows that it has today. The back of the building faced the river. If they could do it over, they'd switch it around for sure. Over here on our left is Kinsey Park. Kinsey Park came about in 2001. Before they broke ground, they sold 400 units. It's a combination of condominiums, townhomes, and even apartments. Now today, if you want to live on this river that once was neglected, one of those townhomes there will cost you about $2 million, okay? That's also a really cool development, because once you drive inside through the gates, you no longer know you're in the city. It just looks like a neighborhood. Really cool. All right, folks, we're going to make a U-turn here. While we make that U-turn, I'm going to jump off the mic for just a couple minutes. Zach is still down there if you need a refill on your drink or your beverages. The restrooms are down there. If I can answer any quick questions, I'll do that. Otherwise, I'll be back in just a couple minutes.